Okay, so I cannot deny this any longer. I'm enjoying the show way more than I thought I would. But with that said, hello everybody, welcome back to the channel. Welcome back to another one of our weekly, the world's finest assassin gets reincarnated in another world as an aristocrat videos. Today we're going to be talking all about episode 3, Magic of Bonds. But before we get to the video proper, quick reminder if you haven't done so yet, to hit that subscribe button, ring the bell, set notifications to all of AnyTube, know that you're here. And without further ado, let's go ahead and jump into this week's episode, shall we? And yeah, so I'm not gonna lie, Luge, he's not like other girls. No, but seriously though, Luge is definitely not like other protagonists in Isekai. Usually, Isekai protagonists tend to be otaku, because otaku are the quickest on the uptake, you know, when it comes to reincarnating and stuff like that. Like, otaku know what Isekai is, right? So like if they find themselves in another world, they're gonna know what the rules of an Isekai are, so it's just easier to have the characters be otaku, right? It's just easy shorthand, right? But Luge's not like that. Luge has a assassin in his previous life. Probably didn't have time to really entertain the notion of, you know, light novels and manga and anime, right? So he didn't really have time for all that kind of stuff. So Luge probably not really going to know the rules of an isekai. And the fact that he doesn't, the fact that he's just sort of going by his own knowledge of being an assassin in his previous life, it makes his demeanor far more refreshing than other characters, right? Like, now don't get me wrong, I still love a lot of otaku protagonists in isekai, right? Like, I'm thinking specifically of, say, like Subaru, or maybe even Kazuma, but like Luge is just too different to the others, like in a good way. Like, he's not like other girls, you know, like his differences are what make him far more interesting as a protagonist of an isekai. The fact that he doesn't really know the rules, and the fact that he's really coming at it from a far more practical standpoint than really any other protagonist that we've seen from an isekai. So Luge definitely has like a lot of my respect on that front. And another interesting thing about Luge is that he can't really, he can supercharge his Far Stones into these like gigantic grenades, right? There's a lot about Luge that just makes him stand apart, right? As an example, I usually can't stand guns in anime. I find guns in most fiction, like when the story is like the fact that like the protagonists use guns, I find that insanely boring. I find guns to be very, very boring in action scenes. I prefer hand-to-hand stuff or other sort of weapon-based stuff like swords, bow staffs, and stuff like that. Guns I find really boring. I find it's really difficult to make a gunfight interesting because there's only so much you could do with a gunfight. In order to have a really solid gunfight, you gotta do something a little bit different, a la The Matrix or maybe even John Wick. Keanu Reeves is basically like the center point for a lot of those narratives. But yeah, usually I'm not a huge fan of guns. You have to do something really interesting. In anime, I'm thinking of maybe Bungo Stray Dogs, right? Like with Oda. Like Oda's skill with guns sort of makes guns very interesting. And normally I'm not a big fan of that, right? Like, I'm normally not a big fan of guns in anime, but Luge makes them really interesting since they're sort of being placed in a world where there are no other guns. You know, like the idea of summoning a rifle and then using a spell to supercharge the bullet inside and make it fire, right? Like, that's very different, right? Like, that's just not something I've seen before, you know? So I'm intrigued by it. I want to learn more about it. And I actually really like the way that it's implemented, especially since they look a lot more steampunky. So it makes the whole setting feel almost this sort of like magical steampunk type vibe instead of this like sword and sorcery type vibe, which I like, right? I'm a big steampunk guy. So if you're going to make it more steampunky and you're going to make it something more interesting where the guns are actually magic instead of just regular guns, that's really cool. And the fact that he can also summon a friggin' cannon is also pretty sick. But yeah, Luge is definitely, he's just an interesting dude. And like we see like a lot of his techniques like around magic do stem from the fact that he was an assassin, right? Like the guns obviously a nod to the assassin thing. The cannon is more of just like military expertise. And the fact that he can supercharge Far Stones like gigantic grenades, right? Like that makes him really cool in my book. The fact that like he has all these weapons that he had previously, but can now implement them in a more magical sense. That's really, really cool, and I really, really dig that. Also, the fact that he thinks outside the box a lot of the time. The fact that his mind just operates on a different level is really cool, right? Like, apparently, nobody in their kingdom thought to ever just write the spells down and try to crack the code, but Luge did. That is a little bit of a stretch. I'm not gonna lie, I was like, that's a little bit of a stretch. But I like it. I like the fact that Luge's brain sort of operates differently because he's from a different world. He sees things a bit differently. Maybe even a bit more selfish, as we'll come to learn later, that maybe our world's a bit more selfish than this one is. But Luge and Dia basically crack the code, and they learn to make gold, right? This is Luge's Spellweaver skill coming in handy, because I'm not gonna lie, the first time I heard Spellweaver, I had assumed that was kind of a useless spell, because a lot of people would have already made spells that Luge could just use that way. But no, like, a lot of people sort of just relied on getting the spells from, like, the deities, right? And then just implementing the skills that they already have, and not really, like, using and borrowing other people's skills. So that's really interesting. So Luge's Spellweaver definitely coming in handy there. And yeah, I'm really enjoying Luge as a character. Dia is cool, I guess, but I will say that there is elements of Luge and Dia that make me very uncomfy. I'm gonna ignore some of those elements for now, because there's other elements that I liked, right? Like, I like that Luge and Dia have that sort of sweet goodbye. I like that they form a really strong, like, bond between each other. But there's other stuff that's just kind of weird. didn't really like certain other elements because they're kids right now, and Luge. It's even weirder because Luge is, like, not a kid. He's like an adult, you know, in a kid's body. It sort of gives me, like, the same uncomfortable vibes that Ascendance of a Bookworm gives me, or I don't like the way that mine treats Lutz in Ascendance of a Bookworm, because I'm like, it's weird because you're both kids, but also mine really isn't, because she's like an adult, you know? So it's like, that is uncomfortable to me. I don't think that Luge sees Dia like that, but the fact that the show kind of hints that, like, the subtext is that, like, the subtext of, like, thank you for a wonderful first time is like, yikes. It's just a yikes from me, right? Like, I'm gonna ignore that for now, because I was able to ignore that for Ascendance of a Bookworm until it got way too squicky and I didn't like it. But I am going to ignore it for now. But I am watching you because I remember the other thing you wrote, and that shit was whack. So I am watching you. Do not pull a redo of Healer on me. I will smack you every which way but loose. You understand me? But with that said, that is not quite everything that I want to talk about this week. Although I did like the Luge stuff. I also want to talk a little bit about his parents, because Ezri and Kian are legitimately really good parents. They actually kind of vaguely give me vibes of Voldy's parents from Demon King Academy, if anybody remembers that wonderful show, which came right at the beginning of the Backstreet Boys reunion tour. That series really came in clutch because everybody just needed some escapism, and there it was. But Voldy's parents in that show were definitely sort of similar to Ezri and Kian, where they're just very supportive and excited, even though their kid is clearly really OP. They just sort of can't help it. They're just very excited for their kid. Kian in particular, like, Ezri's great and everything, but Kian in particular is the one that I'm, like, really interested by, because Ezri, I'm not gonna lie, the writing for the female characters isn't that great. But because Ezri's just sort of like, oh wow, like, Lug is so great. Oh wow, blah 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 blah. Like, just like, let me dress up Lug like a maid because I want to see it. And Lug's just my sweetheart. Blah blah blah. Like, I wish she had a bit more advice to give, you know, like a bit more motherly instinct beyond just, I want to make my kid look cute, which is absolutely fine, but, like, I wish there was just a bit more there. Yeah, the writing for the female characters isn't that great. But Kian is really interesting. Like, the fact that Kian seems to be hiding something from Luge about Dia is very interesting, because when Dia calls him younger brother, he's like, why did you call me that? She's like, oh, Kian hasn't told you. And it's like, oh, are they related? I mean, they kind of look like they could be, right? So it's like, that's very interesting. I don't really know what's up with that, but Kian seems to be hiding something. Even though, like, he really cares about Luge, there's a lot that he's just not telling him yet. Not out of a malice or anything like that. Not that he's hiding something, but it's more that, like, out of, like, a desire to hide from Luge or to obfuscate the truth. It's more that he doesn't feel like Luge's ready to learn all of this yet. You know, he wants him to be a kid. And what I really appreciate about that is that that when Luge asks him, like, why he didn't just tell him this stuff before, Kian rather tells Luge that even though they are assassins, they are people first, not tools, which flies right in the face of what Luge was taught way back when he was still an assassin. This is very different to what he knows. And I really like that. I like the idea that suddenly Luge's past is now being challenged. Because it's true, right? Like, Kian points out that, like, while yes, they are assassins, and while yes, they have a job to do, that doesn't mean that they're not people, right? That doesn't mean that they can't feel and that they can't judge for themselves. You know, like, Kian, I feel like, is also going to fly in the face of what the goddess had intended for Luge when she sent him here, right? Like, the fact that his life is his, not some other entities, you know, like, that is very different. And again, while yes, it flies in the face of his past, it's very accurate, and it's a new way of thinking for Luge that I think is really good. I think it's good that Luge is learning that he gets to just be a person in this world, you know, like, he actually gets to enjoy being around his parents. You know, the fact that he gets parents this time who actually care about him is really cool. The fact that he made his first friend in Dia, right? Like, we're actually seeing these elements sort of piece together this person who was very broken by the time he got here, and now is slowly putting himself together and finding out the person he really could have been in his past, and he gets that chance now. And it's really, really interesting. It's really, really cool, and I really, really like it. The other thing that is quite interesting too is Luge's first kill happens this week. Well, not so much Luge's first kill, but like his first kill in this world, right? Where he is brought to this prison that the family uses to perform either surgeries or assassination techniques on these live humans who are basically these death row inmates who have done some really gnarly stuff. And Kian basically tells Luge, like, hey, there's a girl in here. She is responsible for blah, 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 and you may kill her however you choose, right? And this girl is obviously, like, really distressed and screaming and crying, and explains that she only killed those people because she was hungry and they panicked, and so she had to do something. So she basically spins a sob story, and Luge is just like, okay, and he chops her hand off with the knife that he gave to Dia, like they're twin knives. He gave one to Dia and kept one for himself. And the knife is so sharp that it like can. It's one of those knives that can like. It's so sharp that if you drop paper on it, it'll split the paper. So it's super sharp, but it also the adrenaline will keep her from feeling any pain, so she'll bleed out and then die painlessly. But the girl immediately starts losing her shit and yells at Kian, saying that you said that if I could spin a sob story enough, if I cried enough, he might let me go, right? And that's the crazy thing, is that Kian had basically set it up so that Luge would be sort of conflicted, right? Not like, it is a little twisted, right? But it makes sense that Kian would want to test Luge's resolve, right? The fact that it's this woman screaming and crying about how life had sort of been unfair to her. Obviously, if you're a kid or even an adult, that's going to play to your emotions, right? You're going to feel bad, right? But, you know, at the end of the day, she did kill those people, so there has to be some sort of repercussion. So Luge decides, you know what, I'll make it painless. That's the one thing I can do for you, right? Is that I will make it a painless death. And she didn't like that very much. She basically tells him to, she hopes demons tear him apart and he goes to hell. And Luge's like, you know what? That might be very interesting in my next life, right? And then whips the dagger right into her face, basically saying like, oh, okay, so I was gonna be cool to you, but if you're gonna if you're going to spit in my face, then I'm gonna throw this right back in your face. And it basically sort of sets up that Luge is not gonna play no games. My boy, there's no carnival, no games, right? Like my boy's not playing any games with any of these people. He is still an assassin. Even though Kian tells him that they're people, they still have a job to do, and their job is to take lives that the kingdom deems unfit to be around, right? An illness on the kingdom itself. Like, they are doctors in more ways than one. And I think that that's pretty friggin' badass. I'm not gonna lie. It was a really cool way to end the episode. And yeah, even though there's some stuff that I'm a little bit like uncomfy with in this show, I am mostly just very curious and excited to see where the show's gonna go. But yeah, that's pretty much it though. Outro! And that's gonna do it for today's video, everybody. So I hope you guys enjoyed. If you did, don't forget to boop that up snoot, share if you care, leave a comment down below, and of course, make sure that you hit that subscribe button, ring the bell, and set notifications to all. Let all of AniTube know that you're here. And of course, before we go, as always, I have to give a big thank you to my wonderful masters who help support this endeavor. And of course, I want to give a special thank you to the Masters of Masters who help support us just that little bit more. And I have to give a big thank you to Izevi, Asaki VT, Elizabeth Just Elizabeth, JCran23, Jeremy P, Matt87 Eagle, Shadow Creative, Shiorans, Stephen G, Stevie W, Trapmaster, and Tristan G. Thank you all so much for being so freaking wonderful. I appreciate it. And if you want to hear your name shouted out at the end of these videos, or you want to see your name scrolling past the screen, go ahead and check out the link in the description to our Patreon page, or you can hit that join button right beside the sub button. And that also gets you a badge next to your name as well in the comments if you want people to know how cool you are. But yeah, I'd sincerely appreciate it. It is a great way to help this channel and keep videos coming out. I really appreciate it, everyone. And that is it for me. So you guys take care of yourselves, and of course, do clean your room. It's filthy.